The widow's penalty is one of my least favorite things about taxes. And the reason why is because it leaves someone who is very vulnerable, who is now at a big disadvantage moving forward because of the loss of their spouse. The good news is, as you're going to see in this video today, we're going to show you the power of tax planning and implementing tax planning strategies correctly of what that can lead to ensure that you don't have two burdens when that time happens. Because obviously there's going to be a big emotional burden, which is going to be something that's really hard to deal with, obviously. The second, though, is a financial burden, and we're going to ensure that that is in place with the type of strategies that we can talk about here today if implemented correctly. So there's three things that we have to be worried about with the widow's penalty in my mind. The first one is understanding what happens from a tax perspective. So when one spouse passes away, they go from married filing jointly taxes to single tax brackets, which if you know anything about the tax code, that is at an extreme disadvantage if you have to file single versus married filing jointly. And in most cases, you could potentially pay up to double the amount of taxes by being single than married filing jointly. And one of the big reasons why is because the standard deduction gets cut in half. So the amount of tax-free money up front goes from about $30,000 to about $15,000. So you're going to have a loss of that upfront tax-free money, and then also the brackets, you're going to get to the higher brackets sooner if you're single than if you're married filing jointly. And so because of that, that's going to lead to increased taxes. Now, the other big impact with the widow's penalty is when it comes to Social Security. So as you may know, when both spouses are living, you get both Social Security checks. Now, when one spouse passes away, you only get to keep the higher of the two, and the other one drops off. So if you see two spouses with the same amount of Social Security, $3,000 a month each, they're going to get $6,000 total for their Social Security benefit. Now, if one passes away, their $6,000 income goes down to $3,000. They see a 50% haircut there, and that may cause some harm because now they have to take out more in their retirement because typically, as we know, when one spouse passes away, their expenses do not get cut down in half. Maybe it's about 80, 70% maybe that they still have to cover in expenses without that other one because they still have the same house, they still have the same bills. There just may be a few other things that they don't have to pay for anymore. And so that's going to be a huge loss there if we lose one of the Social Securities. Now, if one spouse was working and the other didn't, maybe their Social Security check was $3,000 and the spouse was $1,500. Well, that $1,500 is going to drop off, which may not be as bad, but $1,500 a month is a lot of money, and we don't have that anymore, so how we're going to plan to replace that income. Now, the third one that we have to worry about here is what's called Medicare premiums. Now that you're single, your Medicare premium tiers are going to be more likely to hit those numbers, which means you could potentially pay more for health insurance, more for Medicare than you were while you're married. And so for most people, if you have high tax-deferred investments, for example, 401ks or IRAs, if you have $1 million or more in those types of investments, Medicare premiums may be starting to become a concern of yours. If you have a pension, maybe that's also going to be a concern, or if you have higher Social Security amounts as well in addition to those items. And so if you're going to find yourself with a higher income in retirement because of all those things colliding together, well, then Medicare premiums may become a concern. Now, if you're married, the limits on that are much higher. Now, if you're single, it gets cut in half, very similar to the married filing jointly to single tax rates, and so your income may be more likely to hit those single tiers. And so with all of those three things together, that's what we call the widow's penalty. And we're going to show you an illustration here of an actual real-life client example of what their situation looked like while they're married, what their situation would look like if they were single with no planning, and what their situation would look like if they were single but did planning, of what their tax burden would be, what their income situation would be. And I think you'll find it very helpful as you plan your future to, one, understand the significance of the widow's penalty, but two, understand the impact of planning ahead and how you can put yourself in a better position. And so as you can see here, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the numbers here on your screen. If you're listening to it from the podcast, I'll go ahead and just talk through these numbers just so you can understand them clearly here. So if you're married filing jointly, let's say for this scenario, they have $48,000 of Social Security. We'll call him Bill. And then let's say Jill had $24,000 of Social Security. Now, that's just simply Jill taking half of that spousal benefit there. And so how that works is maybe Jill had no Social Security benefit at all. She never worked in and paid into Social Security. Well, she's still eligible for half of her husband's benefit while he's living. That's called the spousal benefit. And so they took advantage of that opportunity. And so that's their income numbers for Social Security. They also have an RMD of about $60,000. So they had about $1.5 million in tax-deferred investments, which means that when they turn 73, when they're required to take out required minimum distributions, they're going to have to take out about $60,000 at that time. And so with all of those numbers combined there, we can see that they're going to have to pay about $10,823 in taxes based on their situation, based on the brackets they're going to be in, based on the fact that they're going to have to worry about paying taxes on their Social Security since their income is going to be higher from their RMDs. All of those things factored together gets us to that number there. Now, as you can see next, we're going to look at what it would look like if one of them passed away. And so as we just learned, if one passes away, we know that the Social Security is something's going to happen there. And so one of the Social Securities is going to go away, which means they're going to be able to keep the $48,000 Social Security amount is what we do know, and the $24,000 amount will go away. The RMD will obviously stay the same. So as we know that if one spouse passes, typically the investments go over to the other spouse, unless you have somewhere in there that some of the investments go to someone else. Typically that's not the case though. And so if they all go over to the other spouse, now they're going to have to still take out those RMDs ongoing on that money, is what we're seeing. And so even though they have a loss of $24,000 of income, you're going to see something here when it comes to the tax burden is that it's actually going to be more than what we're expecting, it to be with a lower income, right? And so you're going to see the total taxes due is about $16,841 in this scenario. So I know what you're thinking. How do we lose $24,000 of income but still have to pay $10,000 more, or sorry, $6,000 more in taxes? Well, again, that's the widow's penalty. Married filing jointly tax rates going to single, right? We talked about the Medicare tiers. In this scenario, they're actually going to have to pay more in Medicares. That's baked into the total taxes scenario there. And you can see there they also have lower income, which again, lower income, higher taxes, maybe not the best place to be. And so with this scenario, we actually would consider the widow's penalty not only a loss of $24,000 from Social Security, but another $6,000 from taxes. Their actual widow's penalty here is $30,000. So they're going to be in the hole, they're going to be down about $30,000 from where they were when they're married just because one spouse passed away. And so I guess the power of making sure we both live a long retirement is another lesson we can learn from this. But let's talk about now that, hey, we can't control the future. We don't know if something will happen to someone. We don't know when it would be. How can we plan for this widow penalty to be less? And so if you can see on my other slide here, total taxes in this scenario would only be about $4,800. And the reason why is because we were able to do some tax planning in this scenario here. And so Social Security would still be about $48,000, right? Very similar to the one chart we just went through. Now, the only difference here is we were able to do some tax planning. So now their $60,000 RMD, we were able to reduce that down to $30,000. And you're probably wondering how we did that. For them specifically, we did a strategy called a Roth conversion. Now, we've done plenty of other podcasts and videos on Roth conversion, so feel free to look back at those if you're looking for more guidance on this strategy. But it's one of the most popular tax planning strategies we're seeing right now today because tax rates are lower. Most people expect them to go up over time, and obviously we know one spouse is going to pass away first. And so if we're going to have to take out that money in the future, do we want to take it out at married filing jointly rates or single rates, as we've discussed throughout this video here today? And so with this strategy, they were still able to take out from their Roth $30,000. So we were able to balance their situation so that they could have the choice of do they take out from tax deferred or do they take out from tax free. Now, let's back up and talk about what a Roth is. Well, a Roth is when that money grows tax free, and when you take it out, there's no tax on it either. And so it can be a very viable option with a retirement plan. The problem is right now is that not enough people have a Roth IRA. And the reason why is because there's been a lot of limitations on a Roth over the years. A Roth didn't start until 1997. You can only contribute so much per year. You can't make too much money. You have to be working. There's all these limitations. Now, with a Roth conversion like we're talking about now, there is no limits on a Roth conversion. Anyone can do a Roth conversion if you have money in an IRA. And so those are the types of things that we want to consider with this Roth conversion. And so for this couple here, we were able to do smart tax planning over the years in order to start to get more of this balance. And so I like to think of it like this way. And I always make this joke, but does everyone have all their money in Bitcoin is a question I ask people very often. And of course, everyone says, of course not. We have all of our investments in different buckets. We don't have all of our eggs in one basket, right? You've probably heard that saying before. And if that's been the case, great job. You're doing the right thing. Now, from a tax planning perspective, do we have all of our eggs in one basket is my question to you. Do you have all your money in tax deferred, or do you have all your money in tax free, or do you have a balance? And as you can see, if we go back to the first scenario here, that married couple, they had all their money in tax deferred, which meant they had a huge tax deferred liability. They had a $1.5 million IRA when RMD came in, and they had a $60,000 distribution they required to take at that time. That doesn't leave us much room to plan if we're already setting ourselves $60,000 in the hole at that time. And so this is where we can start to move some of that $1.5 million over to a Roth. We don't want to do it all at once typically, because that would be a huge tax bill and that would probably give you a lot of heartburn. But if we can strategically start moving a little bit each year over the years to making sure that we optimize our current lower tax rates, right? We don't want to convert too much to give us that heartburn, but we don't want to convert too little or none to where we're leaving money on the table with the low tax rate environment that we're seeing right now that's going to exist until 2026, because we know in 2026 tax rates will go up about 20% for most Americans during that time if your income stays the same. So we want to plan for these years especially, and then making sure we have more of a plan over the next 5 to 10 years. And so just by doing these simple Roth conversions each year allows us to lower that RMD, and again allows us to take out money from that Roth, which doesn't count as taxes. And because we're able to implement this Roth and this type of strategy, we're going to see that not only our tax bill is going to go down significantly, but the Medicare premium is going to be at the lowest tier as well. So by taking money out of the Roth, again, that doesn't show up in that MAGI, the modified adjusted gross income calculation to determine Medicare premiums. And so because of that, we're not going to have to pay more for our healthcare costs and get the same coverage. And so that's a strategy that we utilize with many people that we work with there. And so as you can see, just by implementing this type of strategy, your tax bill can go to almost $17,000 to almost $5,000. But again, in order to do this strategy, obviously we have to start paying our taxes now on a Roth conversion. So you do have to worry about that now. So, one question you have to ask yourself is where you're going to get the money to pay the taxes. Many of our clients just withhold that money from the investment if they're over age 59 and a half, or maybe you have some money saved that you can start to draw from to make sure that you can satisfy those requirements. But you have to ask yourself, does paying the tax now, is that going to put you in a better position in the future? And the key question to ask yourself here is, do you think tax rates would be higher or lower for you right now or in the future? Do you think they're going to be higher in the future? If you think they're going to be higher in the future, a Roth conversion would make sense right now, because you can pay those taxes at a lower rate before you pay them at a higher rate. And again, if you have those higher tax deferred, if you have a pension, if you have Social Security, typically those types of people are where Roth conversion most makes sense for. And now with our clients currently, we are doing Roth conversions for the majority of our clients. Now, understand that we don't work with everyone out there. Like I always say, we work with the Midwestern millionaire is what we call them. The millionaire next door, the one who's been a diligent saver, who's frugal, who has worked hard their entire life. And so in those cases, if you have a lot of tax deferred dollars, well, we need to start unwinding this tax mess that we may have at this point. Now, if you have a lower amount saved up in retirement, maybe you only have $250,000 or less in savings, maybe a Roth conversion may not make as much sense to you. It still could, so you still want to evaluate it, but it's more for those people who have more money saved in those tax-deferred vehicles, who are going to be expecting that higher RMD, which is going to push their tax brackets higher, force their Social Security now to be taxable, force their Medicaid premiums potentially higher, is what we're looking at there. So hopefully this lesson on the widow's penalty was extremely valuable for you. Again, just ensuring that you plan for it now versus later. We want to do proactive planning, not reactive planning. And that's something that we see with a lot of advisors out there. We get a lot of people who come to us from our podcast or YouTube and the content we deliver. And basically the main thing they say every single time is, my advisor has not talked about this over time. Why is that? And it may be just because your advisor doesn't specialize in tax planning. And some of them will even go as far to say, yeah, that's exactly what they told us. They said, we're not a tax professional. Go see your CPA. And then you go see your CPA and they don't help you either. So again, the key here is to find a team. If your team's not doing that, making sure you find another team who does this type of planning, who does proactive tax planning and really takes tax planning at the center of their strategies and works around all the other strategies such as investment planning, income planning, healthcare planning, estate planning. How does tax planning play a part in all of those other pillars when it comes to financial planning and retirement? And so that's my hope for you, is that you find that team is going to best serve you here to give you that experience that you're looking for there. And so if you're looking for further guidance and you're looking for our team's help, feel free to schedule a time with us. We'll be glad to have a conversation with you just to see if we can truly help you or answer any questions to see if we could be a good fit to work with you ongoing. We do work with many people that reach out to us from our content, and so we would be glad to have a conversation. Again, we don't work with everyone, but this is an opportunity for us to see if we can help you, if we're a good fit for you. And so if that's you, you can feel free to go in the description below and schedule a time. If you're on YouTube, if you're on a podcast, just go to our website, peakretirementplanning.com, and we'll be glad to have that conversation with you and see how we can give you guidance throughout that retirement that you've worked so hard for.
Since we do not know your specific situation, none of this information can serve as tax, legal, insurance, or financial advice and may be outdated or inaccurate. The information comes from sources believed to be reliable but cannot be guaranteed. This content is prepared for educational purposes only. If you need advice, please contact a qualified CPA, attorney, insurance agent, financial advisor, or the appropriate professional for the subject you would like help with. Peak Retirement Planning, Inc. is an Ohio-based registered investment advisor and able to offer advisory services in Ohio and in other states where registered or exempt from registration.